Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. Today is January 9th already. Oh my goodness, this is lesson 3 of the 2019 semester. So this is level 1, and the topic is going to be all about an extensive understanding of what the time field is when I'm drawing that diagram. So I did a little bit of this last week on level 2. So this is the beginning of the introduction of, if you're just starting to understand things, understanding the diagrams that I'm using in order to talk about time. Before I get going, I see Pedro has a question. Pedro says, when I turned and saw your painting for a moment, I thought that was a negative of a photo from stars. Really interesting, like a photo of the actual stars up there. Really interesting. Okay, get going on a few little drawings over here. I have everything all wonderfully prepared. Well done. First up, this painting. Oh, wait, show my face better. There we go. And let me also move the chat so I can read if there are questions while I'm going. This is familiar to everyone in this class. You've all seen it quite a lot. Let me get the little annotation going up with the color you can see. So we did this for the past 2 weeks. The basics of what the colors are, the basics of what the proportions are. So each one of these colors is a layer of reality. There's a mathematical set of proportions that dictates how these circles are arranged, how they are nested together. And all of this is about time, or the abstract layers of consciousness that surround the anthropomorphic level. And when I'm saying anthropomorphic, literally it means human level. I'm saying we have an interpretation filter that we look at the world through that filter or through that lens, and we understand the world on a human level. But it's different based upon whatever type of species you are. So the microbe lens perception of the world is different than the human anthropomorphic. The dolphin is different. The tree is different. So there's abstract energy. What I'm scribbling on over here, this is abstract energy. Then we interpret it through our system of interpretation, that for us, this body is human or anthropomorphic. And I'm also going to talk about this time apparatus as being a lens of attention. So I also spoke about, this is a little bit of recap over the past 2 weeks. All of these colors are not random or arbitrary, or just because I personally like them or think they are pretty. They have everything to do with, I'm pointing out my window, the light that comes from the sun, our nearest star, and all of these math calibrations, again, are not arbitrarily determined. They are having to do with the color recipe that makes up who we are as little tiny offshoots of the consciousness of this star. So when I show you my little yellow sculpture, for everyone, you tune in all the time, you see me hold up this little yellow sculpture. This is a bundle of timelines. And I've been basically getting everyone to understand that this is a chakra or a spinning wheel of energy. That is one energy center of your body. You have many energy centers on your body. They all have at their convergence point the singularity, not multiple singularities, but one singularity. This shape is mirrored in many other places. It is mirrored in the magnetosphere, or protective magnetic envelope that surrounds Earth herself. It is mirrored in the shape of the heliosphere, the magnetic protective envelope that surrounds the entire solar system. This is a very big thing. Like, if you understand this shape, anything about this shape, anything about the way that it is formed or the way the energy flows around it, that basic truth can be applied to any fractal expression of this shape. So if you know energy flows in a figure 8 around this shape, that is truthful in your own body time field. That is truthful in Earth's magnetosphere. My mouth is not working that well today. That is true in terms of the heliosphere. And that is true even on an atomic or subatomic level. These patterns are the way the energy flows. So it's almost like a way of doing logic or puzzle solving. If you know A plus B equals C at this level in your body, well, A plus B also equals C on the stellar level, on the microscopic level, on the level of the planetary magnetosphere. So what we understand, the insights and the energy patterns that flow around this shape, that those insights are applicable to all of these different layers or levels of reality. the anthropomorphic level of reality, the microbe level of reality, the planetary, galactic level of reality. So this is like the template of existence. I call this the shape, capital T, capital S. It's the shape of everything. And so, yeah, so not to think that this is only a shape of your own as a human energy centers. No, dolphins have this, ants have this, everything has this. Even crystalline structures, crystals are alive, crystals have this. So learning this is absolutely beneficial to your own journey. And then what you understand on an abstract level can then be applied to other understandings of different earthly species, different stellar species. Let me drink a little bit of something because this is like running a marathon. So what you see in this painting over here is kind of like a cross section of that yellow shape that I was just holding up. That if I were to draw a big fat vortex, you know, around the top, up there, my pen's not working that good either, and a big vortex around the bottom down there. And then you can imagine here's that central convergence point. So what we have in this painting is roughly a cross section. And what I'm going to draw and focus on is the lower quadrant, that lower little rounded vortex shape that I'm now emphasizing in white. So here it's that little, there you go, you can see it down there. So it's if I drew it in cross section, it would look like a little, you know, swoopy circus tent. But if I tilt it up like that, it looks like a bullseye. So once again, that swoopy circus tent right there. And if I were to tilt it upward, what we would see is a bullseye. And that's what I've got over here, an outer perimeter with an inner focal point. And that big white dot and this big white dot over here, that's the singularity. So first of all, this shape is a bundle of timelines. Your non-physical present is made up of bundles of timelines, and that means possibilities and probabilities. In last week's level 2 stuff, I began to explicitly describe the descriptors of the multiple dimensions. What does it mean if we're 4th dimensional? What does it mean if we're 5th dimensional? Because there's all of this rhetoric that is going on in the new age, quote unquote, community. People say, we're going to the 5th dimension, age of Aquarius. And I love that song, and it's by the 5th dimension, and they're fabulous dressers. However, we need to understand what's going on in terms of this language. We're already in the 5th dimension. So if I'm drawing over here, if each one of these is a timeline, that's like, you know, a long, skinny French bread, we all already are 4th dimensional beings, and we all already contain the potential for building new timelines at the 5th dimension. So last week I spoke about how the bakery of time, where you take where you have French bread, so like timelines, like here's a line of time. It's like a long, skinny French bread. That line of time is 4th dimensional. And a 5th dimensional experience is the potential for making bread. So it's not like you have all of the timelines lined up on some kind of a shelf at the bakery, and that's the 5th dimension. That's not what I'm talking about. So don't be too literal when I use my little diagrams. Please understand that the 5th dimension is like where you mix flour and water and yeast together, like a big giant mixing tub, and you make the dough of reality. So what I'm talking about, like this bullseye over here, this represents the dough of reality. And it's what your non-physical body is made out of. So it is erroneous to say we are somehow becoming 5th dimensional. Guys, gals, everyone, we're already 5th dimensional. We've been this way for a very long amount of time. The real issue, and I have a video all about this that is called reality creation, is that the dough of reality that we create and produce. How do we produce it? We produce it through observership and imagination. Both of these things are very real things. They are not nonsensical, stupid things. So because your parents might have told you, that's just your imagination. Everybody tells you imagination is just nonsensical and stupid. No, it is literally what the raw, it's like the dough. It's like it's the field where you grow the wheat in order to make the dough of reality. It's your imagination. You have a big giant field where you as a human have access to life force energy, and it is your part of your divine creative capacity, your imagination. And that field where you grow like your corn or your wheat or whatever, then you're supposed to harvest it. You're supposed to make it into flour, the potential for reality. You're supposed to make it into the dough, and you're supposed to bake it into actual experiences like bread or cookies that you can eat. It's supposed to be delicious because you did artisan craft making of bread, not some kind of like, you know, stamped out industrial Wonder Bread. That's because that what you're doing when you are actually in control of your life and your reality creation is you make everything handcrafted. Like if I put a roll in the oven, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, hey, is that oven actually cooked? Is that roll cooked properly? Is it too doughy? Is it too burnt? I'm going to take it out. I'm not going to let it get too burnt. So your imagination is where you make the raw dough. And observership. This is science recognizes this. It's the ovens in front of your eyes. So science does not recognize the power or validity of your imagination, but science does recognize observership. This is part of quantum physics. The idea that there's a sea of uncollapsed waveforms. So here I'm just drawing, here's a bunch of waves. These are waves of possibility, but they're not stuff yet. And what makes it become stuff here is an eyeball. And the eyeball is looking at the stuff of the potential for stuff. And as the observer looks at the stuff, you got ovens in front of your eyes. You are literally applying a transformative experience to that mushy dough and turning it into actual stuff, bread. You can actually experience in reality. So we're supposed to do that. That's our jobs. We're not computers. We are observers. Computers are not observers. Like that's the whole point of AI and all these different things. They can't create reality. They don't have observership. So we are living alive beings. When I say living and alive too, I'm defining alive as, let me get a different color. If you are circulating through this area of the time field where I'm scribbling in red, you are technically alive. Let me get a different color. If you are in this green line that I'm scribbling in green on that membrane, then you are not alive. You are dead. You are on the membrane of death. Okay? So now you're starting to understand the graphic depiction of time that I'm sharing with you. And where do these shapes come from? Where does this yellow shape come from? Where do these colors come from? What is this made out of? It is made out of nothing more than the field of time itself whirling and twirling amidst itself. So all of these shapes are not static shapes, they're dynamic and they are made by the motion of the shape moving. So let's say you have a tornado or a water spout. It is made of nothing more than the atmosphere itself, air and water vapor swirling and making that funnel or vortex shape. Same thing with a lot of what we see on a stellar level, like a lot of, vortex shaped, nebula or something like that. It's like a big giant version of a tornado, lots and lots of gases and lots of cosmic dust swirling together. So what I'm trying to say is it's like, here, my magic trackpad, this has an actual surface that is like different than the air. Here's the actual surface. So that's not what is happening in the time field. In the time field, there's nothing but time, but that time is swirling around just like atmosphere is swirling around. So there's surface area, there's surface tension, there's concentrations of time. That is how this shape is created. And that membrane of death is like the meniscus of a surface of water. What is the meniscus? This is like old science experiment. If you want to wow your kids and they're, not easy, if you want to wow some young people and they're easily impressed, show them a glass of water. Here's a glass of water. And you stick a pencil in like this, and then it looks like the other part of the pencil goes over to the side like that. Like, oh, I'm a very, easily impressed young child. That pencil is broken. The pencil is not broken. The light of the emissions that show us there's a pencil there is being bent by the lens of the meniscus, the thickening of the surface area, the surface tension of water. So time also has a meniscus, and that's that boundary over here that I'm scribbling on in green. That is the membrane of death. So time, the time vortex, big emphasis, the time vortex that we are living within, that we're experiencing, is created by nothing more than the movement of time swirling amidst itself. The membrane of death, although it has like a substance to it, just like surface tension of water has a substance to it, it is made by a thickening of, or a slowing down or densification of time itself. Okay? And all of this is you. This is another big emphasis. I'm not merely talking about something that's an abstraction, like thinking like time is like the game board, like a board game, that you then are like a little player piece that moves on the board of time. No, that is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you are the board, you're the Monopoly board, you're the Monopoly man, you're the little car, you're the money, you're the everything, you're Park Place. It is all you, no distinction. The potentials of probability and possibility are you, and you are the experiencer, and you are also a jazz musician Oh, I got to turn up my piano. Who's got to jazz it up with the rest of the band? How come you couldn't hear this? There we go. You're a jazz musician. You jazz it up with the rest of the band. So I have to establish terms. When I say probability and possibility, what am I speaking about? So possibility, that's like saying, here's a waveform of the higher dimension, fifth dimension and higher. Here's my eyeball over here. I can look at that and I can make a possibility happen. However, it might be a very, very slight possibility. It might be like one little timeline. Here's like one little dot over here that thing could happen. But there's not a very great likelihood. If this whole entire circle bullseye represents the entirety of your life and all, moments of your life, this one little green dot is a very, very, very small, little tiny chance that something might happen. And it could be something good or something bad, like whatever. Move my chair here. Alligators fly in your window in the morning and they bite your face off and you die. Like that would be a horrible way to die. It's not very likely. It is an outlier. It's not very probable. So that's the difference between possible and probable. We're right now coming up with a map of time to understand there are many, many things that could happen in your life experience. These are possibilities, but then to understand not all of them are probable. So if I now begin to draw these concentric circles here, like let's say it's just like a bullseye. Everything within that first little level is not very probable. Everything within that second little level is moderately probable. And then everything where I'm scribbling in black is very, very, very likely because there's literally 10 million timelines that can happen. Because in this view, we're looking at it from the top down. I'll get another color. So this view over here, every single one of these, oh, I got to say this too. Every single one of these long white lines, it's a timeline, but I'm using a shorthand. So in reality, these timelines are spirals and they swoop around the vortex in the path that I just drew. And I hope you can see it. I used kind of a light blue. Let's do it again. Timelines start from the outer periphery. They are spiral in nature and they spiral inward towards that central convergence point. It's really hard to see and understand the diagrams if I am accurate and I draw all the timelines as spirals. So that's why I've developed this shorthand where we start down here at the bottom and then move upward like this, where my arrow is pointing in that direction. But you guys all are super smart. You intellectually understand that I am telling you that this thing is moving around like a big giant spiral. And if we look at the time field, let me just go back to a color you can see. Maybe I think red or something like that. These little lines over here at the edge are relatively short, and that is just like this area of this level of the diagram. The short timelines are very, very numerous. It is very, very likely that you will experience short timelines many, many times. Short timelines, that means like maybe you are born and you die after a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That there are there's a high probability of that happening when you first are born. So also to clarify, this was not the intention by our great composer creator that made all of this, that wanted us actually to come from the source over here, out into reality, go right up the middle. Here, I'm trying to get my pen to go down here, up the middle, go up this big, fat, beautiful yellow pathway and go directly back to the source or God or divinity with no death, no mucking about, see where this red stuff is, not supposed to experience any of that red stuff. That was the original plan. It's like that game Operation. They use the old kids game, right? Where it's like you're trying to get the tweezers, you're trying to get the funny bone out of the guy, and if you touch the outside, it goes, You're not supposed to touch the sides. We're supposed to just circulate through the time field and not actually touch the sides. And if you hear that buzzer, if you hit the membrane of death, you've done something horribly, horribly awry. And again, this goes back to, let me go back to my face actually. Sorry, I have dog hair up my nose too. That seems to be normal for me. This goes back to ancient Atlantis, where I call that the time before death was invented. That there was a time on this planet before the genetic degradation of our present human form when none of us had to experience any of those peripheral possibilities in the timeline. So if I'm holding this like this, right? And then I turn it up on its side like this, now you understand. All of these outer edge possibilities, It not only in terms of personality characteristics is it not the real you, but in terms of life experiences, it is not the real you. So on these outer edge, unlikely, very, very likely, but very, very distorted versions of self. So here's how you can understand this diagram. Here where my pen is, that is the truest version of you. As we move away from that center core, either to the left or to the right, or in this orientation here, center core is the real you, but as we move away from that towards the periphery, less you. As you move further away from the center, more towards the edge, more and more unlike you. So the edge, periphery, where you might have an alligator fly in your window and bite your face to death in the morning before you even get out of bed, that's not the real you. The personality characteristics of you on that timeline, and also the events, are not the real you. And so now we have to begin to understand that there's an interplay between those two things. The events of reality and your personality characteristics. A lot of your personality characteristics are developed in response to events in reality. So alligator eats your face creates these personality characteristics that are not your real self. That's not who you really are. So I am now describing this, we're now understanding this as a lens. This shape, what is this shape doing? So over the past couple of weeks, I've said, hey, there's this thing that exists. It's this shape. It has these qualities. It has these characteristics. You're in it. It's you. Now I'm down to this. What is it doing? The shape is a refinery of consciousness. It is a refinery of light. It is also a lens. So let me draw. You can use that instead of flapping my moving mouth parts. Oops, wait. We do everything properly. Go to the whiteboard. We're talking about what is a lens. So a lens mostly is a curved piece of glass or a curved piece of anything. And when these are light waves come through the lens, they get bent. They get changed in their trajectory. So here's all a bunch of crazy old light waves, but when they hit the lens bends them and makes them all focus on this place. This is kind of like the back of your eyeball. It's a focal point. So what a lens does is it bends light, changes the trajectory of light. Light is consciousness. You can always interchange in my speeches here the word light for the word consciousness. So lenses bend and redirect light or consciousness. They refocus the journey or trajectory of light and consciousness. And that is exactly what is happening through this shape over here. Oh, and also in that little light thing I wanted to show you, it goes from the general to the specific. So if we're using a lens to focus light, we're taking light waves that are big and broad and spreading outward, and we're using the lens to take those things that are moving outward, like dispersing, and instead we're using that lens to bend or change the trajectory of that light until it is converging. And so that's what I want to go like this, like a telescope. When you hold up a telescope, you're like, I am now using these lenses to focus the light so that instead of going hither, thither, all of it gets focused into one little beam. That is exactly what this shape is. That is the reason for our journey through the time field. We are in a journey that is focusing our awareness. We are being focused, first of all, away from the membrane of death. I'm going to say that again. We are being focused away from the membrane of death. In Atlantis, none of us died. The death is an aberration. We are not supposed to have to hit the membrane of death. We're supposed to be in with this central core timeline, not experiencing any of the other peripheral timelines to the side that make us experience death. We're not supposed to have to die. And that was what our culture was like. That is what Earth culture was like before the invention of death. So now over the past all of 5, 6, 7, 10,000, 12,000 years, all of what we call recorded human history, we have been very, very familiar with death. And so this is big takeaway. In one life, I'm talking about this. This is the representation. Actually, this is maybe 4 lives or whatever together. But that lower quadrant down there, that's one life. So I am not referring to, let's say, like the Hindu or Far Eastern idea of reincarnation. Reincarnation is truthful. However, it is not a linear sequence. It's not like first I lived as Van Gogh, then I lived as Frida Kahlo, then I lived as Aurora. No, if you lived as Van Gogh and Frida, you living concurrently. I'm painting my paintings and they're painting their paintings, and we're all doing it concurrently through these nested layers of reality. Or you can understand it, that sculpture is so fragile. You can understand it as like layers of fabric or tapestry. Time is like a tapestry, got many layers of fabric. And then here's my needle pulling thread, sewing all the layers of tapestry together. So if I'm painting on my painting and I'm also Frida and I'm also Vincent, the thread that ties us together is painting. I'm in the studio painting, they're in their studios painting through the many multiple layers of reality. So we can understand that in a positive sense. You might be a teacher. If you are giving your expression here, we're here in the classroom, we're giving my expression. At the same time, maybe you lived in ancient Egypt, maybe you lived in ancient Greece, maybe you're wearing a toga, maybe you are, pointing at something written on a hieroglyphics board instead of a chalkboard. What is going on is many concurrent lives. So yes, there is a refinement process happening across time. So my present experience of Aurora is one layer of a time tapestry, and there are other layers of time tapestry that I'm also experiencing, and all of our concurrent experiences are at the same time bringing us all towards that convergence point. So this is also very big. Because a lot of people think like, I made mistakes in that past life and then I had to get born again and then I'm here and I'm trying to improve myself and trying to get better and better and better. It is not a linear sequence. It is all at once. So in your previous concurrent incarnations, that would be considered in the past, you're trying to get your life together. You're trying to go from being askew to being in alignment, or from being at this angle, maybe with your chakras wobbling like this, to being perfectly in alignment and staying centered on that pathway. So you're wibbling and wobbling in all of your incarnations across time. Wibble, 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 wobble. Except now what is happening is across all time, we are all gaining this capacity to stay focused on the timelines we actually wish for, the ones that are about eternal life and not having to die, the path of least likelihood. So this is clarification. When you enter into this time field down here, the intention was to go directly to the central core timeline, the path of least likelihood, and go all the way back on up. But what's happened because of the genetic degradation is that we've had to explore every single possible peripheral, tangential possibility and not just go directly to the central core timeline. And that is the rigmarole that is very hard. It's a lot of suffering. It's, let me just clear this out. It's literally, do two things at once. The rigmarole is the energy that's being siphoned off and being used to run the dark magic network of, let's call it, oppression and suppression of consciousness. So what's the problem with all of this? This is not the original situation. It's not what's supposed to happen. And also experiencing all of those deaths is what runs the apparatus of malevolence in the cosmos. So I'm drawing the same time vortex again from the two different perspectives, right? And understanding that these are simplified. So this timeline that I'm drawing up the middle here, with the infinity point there, and this one over here, the little belly button that I just drew in the middle. This is the path of least likelihood. And it is called that because in this whole entire time diagram, there's only one of those pathways. So there might be 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 little dots all around here, where I'm scribbling. There's 1,000,000 timelines that are the periphery. There's 1,000,000 timelines that lead you towards the membrane of death, which would be, going askew, going at an angle like this, going at an angle like this. There's 10 million, billion, uncountable, many, many opportunities to die. There's only one possibility where you live, and you live eternally to the point that you do not have to die. So this is very big because, oh my goodness, there's a lot of programming. Let me drink some water here. There's a lot of religious programming, and I call it death cult religion. And I'm not here to be disrespectful to anybody's religion. You might notice that I wear a cross, but I'm not affiliated with any earth churches, doctrines, or stories about what Christianity is. This is my symbol of Christ consciousness, this part of my body. This is not about, an earthly savior or anything like that. So this whole thing, what I call the death cult, again, not disrespectfully to you, but understanding that this is horrifying in its distortion of what is being taught to you as the desired outcome of your life. You're not supposed to have to die, hit the membrane of death, like going in this direction. Oh, look, I'm going to hit the membrane of death. And then some, mythological savior program will come along and say, oh, you're not supposed to be dead in hell over here. Let's, pick you up, dust you off, stand you on your feet and send you on over to heaven, which would be the equivalent of, going here to infinity. So it's like kind of saying the Christian religion is a death cult because it tells you that in order to achieve eternal life, which is, going up this central core timeline, what you have to do is first hit the membrane of death. It tells you first go in this direction, die, and then somehow you will magically get reinserted over here to the central core. And that is illogical, and that is not what I perceive as the truth. So that is my big beef or criticism with Christianity. So yeah, you're never supposed to have to leave that central core timeline. So what has happened in our journey up into this point is the basic trajectory is we come out here to the very furthest periphery, assemble in a physical container, a little tiny fetus in your mommy's belly, and then you're born, and you might live a moment, and then you die. And then this is a flowing membrane, this membrane of death. It is like a waterfall or like a sheet of water. And when your consciousness enters into that waterfall, it's very powerful. It's like rapids, of whitewater rapids. And it unmakes the sweater of you. And then you circulate back to the beginning, like a loop over here, and you start again. And of course, this is a cross section, so you're moving in from both sides. I'm just doing a simplified drawing here. And then the second time, maybe you live for a day. Somebody drops you on your head and you die. And then you have to get unsweatered and go back to the beginning and try again. And over here, maybe you live to this point and then you die, and you die a million times. So you die due to pathogenic disease. You die due to infanticide. Your mommy and your daddy don't love you and they kill you. That happens. There's many different possibilities where you die. So even making it to like 5 years old is like, pat yourself on the back. Huge accomplishment. Whatever age you are, if you're 30 or 40, like you have transcended death many, many times. Or another way of saying it, it's very similar to that movie, Groundhog's Day with Bill Murray, where he is an adult human that is fated to continually experience a time loop over and over within one day until he can finally transcend the limitations by becoming a better person, essentially. He refined his personality characteristics. He started off as like a selfish cad and a loser. And then he got suicidal because he couldn't die and he kept being stuck in the day. And then eventually he decided, well, why don't I try to actually help people? Why don't I try to do something good? And that was the beginning of his ability to align with the central core timeline, who he really is, and exit that constraint of reality. So this is what we are doing in one lifetime, from birth to death, that we are attempting to focus our attention on the true personality characteristics and true events that define our personality and who we really are, and not to be distracted by and drawn into the periphery, which is who we really are not. I need to drink a little bit more water. Hold on a second. Oh, there's more questions, and I'll get to good questions. So in the most frustrating way, humanity has had to try every single possible iteration or a combination of ideas and actions and thoughts and beliefs constantly circulating through all of these time loops, and then dying and then going back to the beginning and trying again. And although you do not necessarily carry with you a conscious memory of, oh, I went there and I made a horrible mistake and they made me die and I had to try again, you do carry with you a genetic or energetic, non-conscious or supra-conscious memory where you're like, oh, I know, don't make that choice. It's like a choose your own adventure novel where you're like, get to page 19. Do you choose to go down the dark alleyway, or do you choose not to go down the dark alleyway? The version of you that chose to go down the dark alleyway turned to page 299 and died. The version of you that chose not to do that again chose to stay alive. And I have many stories that people have shared with me about their timeline life choices. Like one friend of mine from way back in Woodstock, in her wild years of being like a late teen, early 20s, she was hitchhiking around a lot. And it was also kind of like, decades ago. It wasn't in the modern era. She's hitchhiking around. She's at this truck stop. This guy's like, hey, you're a cute little blonde. Hop in my truck. I'll take you where you need to go. She's like, okay. And she said she went into the bathroom to whatever, use the bathroom, wash her hands. She's washing her hands. She had a very quick flash of herself dead in a dumpster. And she took the message. That was literally a tangential version of herself on a timeline that's not the same timeline, a neighboring timeline, saying, don't go down that alleyway, make a different choice. And she said she felt it so strongly that that was so dangerous that she wouldn't even go back and say to the guy, no, I don't want to get in your car. She climbed out the bathroom window and she, did something else. So that's just one example. I'm sure every single one of us has a very, a good example of, like, you might call it your guts, or your intuition, or some inner force that tells you, don't get on that plane, don't do that thing, make a different choice. And because if you don't listen, you get to die and then circulate back to the beginning. This is the least efficient, most frustrating, most suffering way that we can possibly experience this. And again, all of the last moments on the membrane of death, these lollipops, you got a little lollipop, these little red dots is the last moments. That's the ending of your movie, and it contains the hard drive. Here's my little hard drive. Here's my hard drive. This contains all of my memories, all of my digital memories. In your life, you accumulate all of your memories. What we're supposed to do is do a live stream, broadcasting those experiences to the sun and the stellar network in reality while we're experiencing them. But because of the genetic degradation and constant mental chatter, most people do not broadcast any of their experiences as a live stream. It is all as an archive. So you die when you hit the membrane of death. Here, I'll draw it as a little blue box because my hard drive is blue. When you hit the membrane of death, here's your little blue hard drive. And you send that to infinity, send that to God. And God checks through your files and was like, I wish I had known about this sooner. I would have done something to help you out. But now it's too freaking late because you are no longer in the time field. You are no longer in the zone that is called the alive zone. Here's the alive zone. You're now in the membrane of death, where you are dead. And I can't do anything about all the things that you experienced because now you're dead. So in order for me to help you, you got to circulate back around and go back to the beginning and try it again. Again, this is causing tons of suffering, hugely inefficient, and all of this energy that is on the membrane of death is not supposed to be there. The membrane of death is supposed to be a perfectly clear channel, a clear conduit. I use this example all the time. Here's the little hallway in my little zone here. And the hallway goes from here to the bedroom. And the hallway is not a place where you're supposed to have like 17 people setting up little tents, camping gear, shelters, cooking mini hot dogs. That is not what my hallway is meant for. It is a transit place from one place to the next place. That's what the membrane of death is supposed to be, a transit place from one place to the next place, not a place where squatters are supposed to set up shop and live there for 10 or 20,000 years cooking mini hot dogs. Because I got to use that hallway to get from room to room. So this is the problem with the time field. I'll go back to my face because I just got through telling everybody that the time field is an actual living alive being. I got to drink a little bit of water here. Not some dead abstraction, not just a board game that you're, playing on top of. You are the time field, and having occupiers of the interstices. So now you guys are starting to get my language. The membrane of death is the interstices, or the membranes between worlds. It's like a transit place, like a hallway, that instead of being perfectly clear with energy flowing as it is supposed to through the time field, there's blockages. There's personality characteristics that are not dissolved, that are stuck there. So I call those the pesky occupiers of the interstices. And Pedro is my acronym guy. And he says, let's call them pooties, P-O-O-T-I-S. I think that's cute. I sometimes call them turds because I don't know if you've ever had this. Like you flush the toilet, it's making a vortex, circling everything on down. But there's these floaters and they're just circling the bowl and they refuse to actually go down. That is what the occupiers of the interstices are. They are consciousness residues, beings who once were alive, however briefly, in physicality, in that, alive area of the time zone. And they smashed their guitars on stage. They intentionally destroyed their physicality. This is lesson 18. So I'm giving you, a preview of what lesson 18 is about. Dog hair up my nose. Yes, they smashed their guitars on stage. They don't have physicality anymore. They live as squatters in the interstices, and they got nowhere to go. But don't pity them, because they'll be like that. They'll be like, poor me. It's not my fault. I'm a demon. I'm stuck on the interstices. Help me. Give me love. Like, let me eat you. Let me eat you, because it's like, no. They made horrible, horrible life choices. It's like, I'm not just being some kind of a heartless Republican here, like on a cosmic level. No, that's not what this is about. Because again, this is a refinery of consciousness. a refinery of personality characteristics. If you make horrible, horrible life choices, then it's like playing, cover your ears, everyone. That is not nice music. If you play bad music like that, you get to die. You don't get to be alive. And then you deserve to be where you are. Again, I'm not saying that people who die of cancer or whatever are like, nah, nanny poo poo, you deserve to die, you're a bad person. No, but the beings that created an artificial Merkaba and destabilized, the entire magnetosphere at the end of the culture known as Atlantis, like they get what they deserve. They did it on purpose. They did it knowing that it would be not okay. It's like they were playing fast and loose is the best way I can say it. Kind of like kids playing with firecrackers, blah, we don't care, do this. Yeah, and they horribly harmed our planet and they horribly harmed our bodies here, and they got stuck on the interstices. But they don't look at it like a bad thing. They're like, oh, we can't get life force energy? That's fine. We'll steal it all from you. And that's how they set up the economy of hell. So yeah, the interstices are hell. It's not that much fun to learn about this. I know, I'm sorry. And essentially what we are attempting to do is no longer give any energy or new fresh occupants to the interstices, which is hell. If we can focus everybody in their pathway, in their journey, away from the askew angles and towards the perfectly aligned angles, then we don't have to have any new occupants go into hell. And what can happen to the people that are in hell? They can go into a state of entropy, which is what I will talk about in terms of non-duality in level 2. I'm now going to actually get to the questions. I'm saying actually because I'm like, I'm on target. I got through almost all the things that I wanted to say in level 1. If you guys know me, well, I often level 1 will be like a 3-hour long thing. And then I'm like, oh my God, I actually have to get to level 2. So I'm happy. I got through all of my notes and all the things I wanted to get to. So now let me go to, I have to squint and scroll. I'm sorry, I'm squinting and scrolling. Let me see what's being said over here. Hans, good to see you, my friend in Sweden. Sending you some sunshine. Hans says, is my chakras my part of the time field? Yeah, so this is a good question because his question includes my with quotes around it. So if I show you this picture, here, just bring up this picture. Go back, wait. Show you this picture. So let's say this guy in the middle here is Hans, and let's say that every place where I'm scribbling in black, this is all of the timelines and possibilities and probabilities that represent the non-physical aspect of Hans. And if we define Hans by his individuality and his personality characteristics, all of this time field stuff, those are his personal timelines. Those are his part of the time field. And part of this refinery of consciousness is a change in our identity or the definition of self, because you start to understand that all of these different time fields are related. So if you have one vortex that's over here like this, that goes down into you, but that vortex, how can I draw this, is actually connected to a larger one that goes in the opposite direction here. I'm sorry, my words don't describe it, but you have a complementary impulse that's going in this way, that if this is the base of the vortex here, that it then goes upward. I don't know if you can see that, but it would go here, if I'm drawing it like this, it would go up in this direction, and that represents a complementary lifetime. Like if you are in this moment now, that might be your Van Gogh lifetime, or your Frida Kahlo lifetime, or whatever. So here, wait, go back to my face. So our lives are intertwined in the time field on a profound level. That means that you begin to change your definition of self. Because, okay, if I have one quadrant of this is one incarnation down here, but I've told you that energy circulates in figure eights, and you can apply those figure eights to any level of the microcosm, macrocosm, then you understand here's another incarnation, here's another incarnation, here's another incarnation. And that all of these figure eights are energies that are being shared through all of these various incarnations. And this is just in one chakra of your body. And you have at least 7 main chakras and many other sub-chakras. So Hans defines himself as, I'm this guy that has this epidermis and this physical structure and this set of personality characteristics and this trajectory through the time field. And if you do that, then you also recognize, well, wait a minute, I'm this physical structure, but I'm also getting energy from that physical structure that might be hundreds or thousands of years in the past or future. And your journey and that other physical structure's journey are totally intertwined within this shape. So then you start to recognize, wait a minute, if I starve in this moment now, it affects that guy from 10,000 years ago, or 5,000 or 1,000 or 100. And what happens to me now affects that guy, not in a biological ancestry sense, but in the sense of consciousness, that guy who will live in 100 or 1,000,000 or however many thousands of years. So sense of self becomes redefined as we begin to understand the time field on a more multi-dimensional level. So yeah, it ain't just you, because it's you in this present moment. It's you. There's the, sometimes, I'm sorry guys, sometimes my words do not describe adequately the things that are in my mind. So I'm always trying to say the right thing, but forgive me if it doesn't come out exactly right. The you that is experiencing this moment now is also experiencing, how can I define you? We need to change the definition of the word you or me in order to include concurrent multiple aspects of self, and recognize that all of these aspects of self are all responsible to one another, that I'm responsible to the other aspects of self, because if they starve, I starve. If I starve, they starve. This is also how you can begin to understand why I root for people. Why I'm like, paint that painting, like do that thing, do whatever you're doing is your thing, like do your thing, because your thing, our lives overlap quite a lot. And I'll get to that. I should draw that. Remind me to draw the overlapping time field thing. Okay. Thank you, Salu says, so dope. Thank you very much for that. Pedro says, are there more ways to hit the GOTA, means game over, try again, acronym, GOTA, G-O-T-A. So that membrane of death, or the interstice, it's just like if you were playing a video game, driving my Mario car, and I drove off a cliff. Wah, wah, game over, try again. And that's what our lives have been like. P.S. I'm not a transhumanist, if you're new to my broadcasts. And also, P.S. the suffering is real. So one of the differences between myself as galactic being and the beings that use technology and are very disreputable and unethical is that they'll be like, doesn't matter how many times you die, like it's just an abstraction. It's not the real you, because every time we go through these time loops, it's like re-recording over an old-fashioned audio cassette, like a reel-to-reel. So this is from last century's technology, like an old-fashioned audio cassette where you can record your favorite songs off of the radio. Then when you get bored with them, then you can record new songs over them. And that is exactly the analogy that what we've been doing with our lives. You record a song, it's not that great. You record another song on top of it, with the idea that at the end, you get to that path of least likelihood, right? Going up the central core timeline. That's your final version of your final song. It's the best song you ever wrote, or the best song you ever sang or played. And that's your final recording. So the evil satanic beings, I just got to drink more water. They will try to say, all of those other deaths didn't matter. All of that other suffering didn't matter. Like it all got erased. You made it to heaven anyway. Like, what are you complaining about? Like, stop your belly aching. Stop your yammering. You got to where you wanted to go anyway. Because clearly they're like big jerk faces. They are not nice at all. Like, they're not me. They're not the way that I am. Because I would be like, oh no, this is too much suffering. This isn't right. And also, the way that I am is the way that God is. God would never be like, let's create a system for maximum suffering. Because I'm also like this. Suffering does not help people to learn. Suffering does not help me to learn. Suffering does not help me to learn more math or learn more songs or play better songs or anything like that. No. Suffering actually makes it harder for me to concentrate. Like if you ever had like some physical illness or whatever, and you're like trying to do your work or play the piano and you're like, but like whatever, your knee hurts, you can't do it. No, suffering is very, very challenging and makes it harder for us to learn and harder for us to do all these things. So the great composer did not create a system that was filled with maximum suffering so that it would take literally as long as it possibly could through the most difficult, circumstances possible for you to finally learn about who you really are as a person and transcend these levels of difficulty. No, that's just what we're experiencing, but that was not the intended. So everything here has been, repurposed, hacked like hackers hack. And that's not the way that's really supposed to be going. I need to drink more water. Hold on a second. So this is a good question that Pedro is saying now that I'm describing the game over, try again membrane. He says, Are there more ways to hit the game over, try again membrane when you are young than when you are older? The answer to that is yes. It's a provisional yes, based just merely in the graphic representation of this, that you can see the shape of the vortex goes from being a very wide shape from the general to the specific. We're focusing the lens, like focusing a telescope. So there are many, many opportunities to die when you are younger. And as you get older, the time bundle of possibilities narrows. And so part of that is when you're a tiny little infant, you're not as in control of your life as when you are, adolescent or adult. Like when you're a little infant, like you can't even move your arms and legs. You can't like turn yourself over in your crib. You can't get your own food. It's really easy to die. We're almost totally dependent upon the people around us to take care of us. So you not only can die through, exposure to pathogens and things like that, but there's just basic neglect. And then there's also abuse. When I said like your mommy and your daddy didn't love you and they dropped you on your head accidentally on purpose, that stuff really happens. Like, I'm making a joke out of it, but that stuff really happens. And none of that is because of your choices. So this is also a big emphasis or a big takeaway in this presentation, that our trajectory through the time field where we are is supposed to be based upon your choices. Like, do I choose to eat that horribly rancid poison food or not? Do I choose to, accept the truck driver's invitation and be dead in a dumpster or not? So that's the whole idea. You can't call this a refinery of consciousness if you don't get to make an actual choice. Then it's like a random suppression of consciousness, not a refinery of consciousness. So yeah, we are supposed to be able to make choices. So when you're a little tiny infant, you don't make that many choices. Mostly we struggle against pathogenic infection and, starvation and abuse. And then once you start to be able to be mobile and you can get around, and also once you become verbal and you can understand, and when you can read stuff, that that helps out so much, because you can be like, oh wait, this says poison, don't eat it, I'm not going to eat that. Like, think about how many deaths can be avoided once you understand language and someone tells you stop. Like, like you're a little kid, like I see this all the time on the street. We've got little kids running with their little tricycles or whatever right through a stop sign, and the mom is always saying stop, don't do that. So when little kids listen and they hear the word stop and they don't go through this, then they're much less likely to die. Guess who's coming on over? Because she hears me yelling about stuff. Come on over. So learning language and the ability to be informed by the other people around you helps you to stay alive. Learning to read helps you to stay alive. So yeah, as we come into adulthood, and also mastering your body. So you're not some spastic little infant. Infants are cute and everything, but like they're clumsy. They can't do stuff, whatever, even little toddlers. Like you don't give knives to toddlers because they don't have the motor skills for it yet. So adulthood and maturity means that we are more in control of our own existence, make more of our own choices, have better motor skills, have better intellectual skills, and also have more experiences upon which to draw. So in my own experience here as Aurora, I came in adulthood into this body. So I did not have the same journey as someone who grows from like a little tiny childhood. Yet I had to go through all of the different levels of learning and understanding the do's and don'ts of this culture. And there's some things where it's like, don't walk out into traffic without looking both ways, because that is a definite don't of this culture. You have to learn about all the different things, what to do and what not to do in order to stay alive in this time and place. So a big part of it is developing a catalog of experience upon which I could draw from which I could draw. Because let's say like you're a little tiny child, you're naive, no one has ever lied to you. And then one day someone lies to you, and then you learn, wait a minute, lies are a thing. And now in future conversations, I will draw upon this experience in order to determine whether a person is being truthful or whether they're lying. This is a part of what refines us away from death, because someone can say to you, here, drink this, it's really good for you. And you can be like, wait a minute, I'm now drawing upon my catalog of experience. People can lie and they can put poison into things. Maybe I shouldn't eat that apple that the horrible witch is offering to me in my, arboreal abode. So we get older and wiser, and then it helps you to live longer and helps you to avoid the membrane of death. And of course, someone else also asked, according to the structure of this, does that mean that you have to live to be 100 years old to get through that little wormhole? And that wormhole, when I draw it as a very exaggerated opening, but it's tiny. It's tiniest, it's the tiniest little hole. It's only one timeline big. So no, you don't have to live to be 100. You don't have to live to be 1,000. The idea is that if I were to draw it, when you get up to that level of the skinny part of the vortex, the skinny part of where things are refined, we are looking down the tunnel over here. And let's say I'm in this red zone where this is like, we've lived maybe 85 years, right? And so these timelines where I've lived a very, very long amount of time, but don't actually make it through the wormhole. Here, I'm going to draw this in red. You can see this red line I just added. That's like almost all the way to infinity, but not quite all the way there. So those are some pretty critical timelines where you've done all of the work, you've done a lot of the self-cultivation and figured out a lot of your own personality characteristics and who you really are, but you're just not perfectly in alignment. And it might just be one small life choice to take you from experiencing death to experiencing eternal life. And so part of that can be just the inner expectation that death is not inevitable. Like, let's say you're a person who's 89 years old and you're like, oh, like you just have to die. And that's like how you get out of this physicality. And then someone sends you a book or you listen to a video that says, death is not actually necessary. You have other options. You can do this, 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 and this. That can be the difference between being a slightly askew 89-year-old and a totally in alignment 89-year-old that then does not have to die. So death is a construct that has been programmed into thinkers at this level as a presumed inevitability. And it's also programmed in as the doorway. Like, you want to get out of here, you're going to have to die. That is not what I'm telling everyone. And I can give you this information. Sorry, we got some trucks going by or something outside. I can give you this information because I actually have firsthand knowledge of it. So again, I'm not just, whatever, blowing smoke. I'm not just making things up or talking nonsense. I'm actually talking about things that I have firsthand experience of. So yes, it is not necessary to have to die in order to transcend our levels of constraint and difficulty. We were never intended to die. So here are two big changes. We were intended to be in our bodies, still connected. And I want to do this. This is crown chakra. This is indigo chakra. Both of these things together. We're supposed to be connected to the sun and the stars, even while we are in this body. So that means that we redefine our experience of being here in the body, and then we do not have to die, which is how I define death. We're talking about a cessation of physical metabolic processes. Your physical matter stays in physicality while your energy or spirit or consciousness, the non-physical aspects of self, kind of shloomp off somewhere else. That is not what is supposed to happen. You're here on a project. The project is called your body. This is why please invest in your body. Get the best water and the best food you can afford that's available to you, because this is not the project that I came here to pay my electric bill. No, this is the project where I came here to cultivate a body and literally raise dense energy that's at a lower frequency to a higher frequency. So what you're supposed to do is not die and leave your body behind. You're supposed to ascend, which is transform the matter of your body. So you stay connected to the divine while you're in your body. That's like doing a live stream. You don't just turn on your hard drive at the end of the experience, and the end of the experience is not death, is not hitting the membrane of death. It is going through the wormhole, which means you have continuity of consciousness. So what is death? Death is literally like cutting a timeline. So in ancient Greece, there was the understanding of the three fates, the embodiment of these timelines. So there was the one fate, the youngest one, that wove the thread of your life. There was the middle-aged one that sewed the thread or put it into the tapestry of time. And then there was the crone, the oldest one, who had big giant pair of scissors, who would cut the thread of your life. And that is, death. You're literally ending those timelines. So my understanding of what ascension is, it is not a biblical, literalist Christian rapture, even though those images are poetic, and believing in them does not make you a bad person. Like, it makes you, a vulnerable person, like wishing for something better and, being vulnerable. There's nothing wrong with that. However, it is very misguided, because we're not talking about a physical movement of your physical body. That's not what rapture is. That it is a transformation, or ascension is a transformation of your physicality into a non-physical, or here's light, purely light state. So you go from being dense to being not dense. And that's what it is, and that's what we're supposed to do. So it's kind of like saying you come down here, you get a material body, and you get to take it with you, which is very different than the present death cult teachings. The death cult teachings also teach disassociation from the body. So please caution, like there's some meditation schools where they tell you to meditate, this is not my body is not me, but you know, that's not actually truthful. That's not actually right. So part of it is understanding that our bodies allow us to explore and give rise to our true personality characteristics. Like my true personality characteristics include being a dancer and learning about movement and learning about gesture. And I couldn't do that if I didn't have a body to move. Same thing with being a singer, being a musician, being an artist. I couldn't do these things if I didn't have a voice to sing, if I didn't have hands to hold a paintbrush, if I didn't have the capacity to do these things. So our physicality is part of our personality, but it doesn't define us. Like clearly there are people who have, they have amputations or whatever, and if they're meant to be an artist, they paint with their mouth. You do it anyway. So that's what it's like. Your body does not define you, and that's the value of those timelines. So a person who might be whatever, an amputee on those peripheral timelines, there's a lot of suffering because it's not the true you, and you've been distorted from your true purpose. And the value is, like if I see there's a young woman, she whatever does not have limbs, but she still dances, and that's because she is being her true self in spite of the difficulties of the physical body. So that's another big takeaway. Yes, you can ascend even if your body is damaged. So you do not, if you, let's say you lost all of your limbs in a horrible accident, and then you say, oh no, I don't want to stay alive because I can't ascend from this position. Actually, you can. And I'm an example of that too, because I had tons of neurological damage in this brain, in this body, that should have made me a vegetable in bed. And clearly, I'm not a vegetable. I walk, I talk, I sing, I dance, I paint, I do all these different things. And I do all of them through flying rainbow lasagna. So the basic takeaway here is stay alive. Even if your body gets damaged, don't think like, oh no, now my body is damaged and I can't ascend and I can't do this and that. Miracles can happen. That if you stay alive and if you continue to be your true self, that then you will be able to align with the improvements or healing in your body that allow you to keep on being your true self. So it might also involve something like, some external support system, like a prosthetic or something like that, that allows you to keep going. So I'm not because I'm also very anti-technological, and I'm always saying that does not apply to things like prosthetic limbs or life-saving medication. Like, you might have to have something like that to help augment your body. But then when it all comes down to it, yeah, we can do amazing, miraculous things with healing that are not technological. But to get, that's like the difference between an 89-year-old person who's slightly askew and an 89-year-old person who continues through the wormhole and doesn't have to die. It can just be the intellectual understanding or software program that our body contains miraculous healing mechanisms, and that we can really do things that would be considered impossible in terms of physical, objective, materialist science and the medicine that comes from it. We can do things that would be considered superhuman or impossible, from even not having to eat physical food to transcending injuries. We are literally redefining what it is to be, in a physical body. I got to move on to level 2. So more questions than level 2. Dominic asked a wonderful question. He says, what state of consciousness is a crystal? I don't know how to describe state of consciousness. Like awake, asleep, angry, happy, sad, poopy, gassy. I don't know how to describe that. I do know how to describe that crystals are containers for consciousness. And so when we take a crystal, like I got some crystals over there on my table. When you take something like that, it's like the neurology of the planet that we are in. Like we have little tiny crystals that help to transmit neurological signals throughout our body. And when we dig something up out of the ground, that crystal instructor is like, well, wait, I'm supposed to be doing something as part of the neurology of the body. So it still tries to do it, like even while we've got it, sitting in our pocket or whatever. So I don't know how to answer like what state it is in. Maybe more questions. Next is by Pedro. He says, I thought that Jesus Christ showed us that death is not the way, ascension is, but I still am not sure if he really died and was resurrected. let's use the story of Jesus Christ as like a story or an allegory and not something that is literal. And according to the story or the allegory, the human male had to physically die and go through the metamorphosis that happened after metabolic death in order to become a purely divine being. And there's a lot of stuff that's at the foundation of the Christian religion that has to do with humans being flawed from the beginning, like original sin, or that you have some kind of unworthiness, and that somehow death will erase that unworthiness. And I'm here to tell you that those are erroneous assertions. You do not have to hit the membrane of death and die in order to become refined into the best version of who you really are. What you need to do is become the best version of who you really are. So in my own personal experience, I've been faced with many different cusps or decision-making nodes in the pathways of life. Like if you're hungry, like here's a sandwich you can steal. Are you a steal? You're hungry. Are you a stealer too? Like you get opportunities to say who you really are and who you're really not. And that is what the time field is all about. And then by the end of this experience, so life is not about, the goal of life is not about amassing wealth to get, like, I gotta get a lot of money, I want to sit on a golden toilet. That is not the goal of life. The goal of life is not to like leave behind a giant fortune or leave behind a lot of whatevers to impress someone else. The goal of life is to define who you are. So if you have been in the time field and you're placed in an opportunity situation where it's like, okay, you can either steal this and stay alive or not steal this because that's not who you are. You could be like, okay, like you demonstrated who you are. Again, I see all of this magic does not happen standing on the sidelines outside of reality. It happens as an experienced, embedded experience or participant. Hold on a second. Yes, so I don't know. I mean, it's very difficult to tell. Was there an actual person? Was there an actual Jesus? What actually happened to that person? Were they actually tortured? Did they actually do this or that? Just, there's a lot of stories that are control mechanisms. That's what I'm agreeing with you. More drinking. Sorry. Chloe says, I think I have ancestral memories and they are not versions of me from timelines. Can you have both? Absolutely. There's your individual memories from different timelines. There's what you connect with in terms of your ancestors or the DNA that's distilled down into your present body. Yeah, that's very possible. Pedro says, what happens to the other timelines affects us too. Yes, exactly. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Then you start to understand that all of our music is interacting. We have to be co-responsible. What I play is affecting other timelines. What they play is affecting my timelines. So I have to be a really good musician in order to send that stuff out. And you can make a little joke like, stop throwing your junk into my dimension. You're like, your neighbor's always throwing stuff over the fence. It's like, stop throwing your junk over here. Like, take care of your stuff. Pedro says, so you could live to 200 and hit the membrane, and your ascension timeline, you only live to 100. Yes, thank you very much. So let's say that there's some people who are very misguided on Earth right now, and they think like, oh, when I die or a moment before I die, I'm going to get my head chopped off and cryogenically frozen, and then I'll be able to live to whatever. First of all, that's a horrible idea, and that does not place you on your ascension timeline at all. But like some people might undergo some kind of a procedure to live to 200, like get nano stuff injected into you or whatever it is. That stuff is totally against the ascension timeline. It's not in alignment with who you really are. It might extend your life chronologically. So you might artificially be able to extend your life in physicality, and then you will still die and hit the membrane of death. And again, you might live to 200, 300, 1,000. There are malevolent black magic using jerk faces that do stuff like this, where they're like, vampires. They use technology in order to extend their physical life. But that does not mean that then they're going to ascend. It's not like, oh, I extended my journey by 600 years by drinking the blood of, sacrificial virgins, and now I'm going to ascend. Like, no, they would have to die, go back to the beginning, and get themselves onto an ascension timeline where they did not have anything to do with sacrificial virgins, because that ain't going to do it. Like, you've got this too much dead weight. It's like you're carrying like all of your sacrificial virgins. You cannot get through that little tiny wormhole. Salu says, what about a 90-year-old who is consciously very, very askew? Could we say that it's their body vitality that helped them to stay alive for so long? Yes, because I have family members like that too who lived to be in their mid to late 90s, and they were not you know, loving, conscious beings. They were, you know, whatever, like angry, embittered old people. You know, they were not happy, fun, anything like that. They were just ornery. They stayed alive because they were ornery, and they just, you know, kept going. And I think there are a lot of people that are like that. They were not happy or productive in their elder years. And so that's, they did not have a good quality of life. They were suffering in their existence. They weren't like happy and free in their existence. Pedro says, Ascension is like a block of dry ice, solidified light, turning into vapor, becoming light. The goal is to hoard light and refine it and take it with us when we ascend. I hug you through the screen. That is exactly what we are supposed to do. And your description of dry ice is perfect. So dry ice sublimates. Regular ice melts. If I have a regular ice cube and I have it at room temperature, it is solid, solidified water that then turns into a liquid. If you have dry ice, which is solidified frozen carbon dioxide, when it is sitting at room temperature, it does not turn into a liquid. It goes from a solid state directly to a gaseous state. It sublimates. It does not go through a liquefied state of being. So I'm going to get more into that in level 2, the states of matter and how that relates to entropy. So press pause on that, but let me just say, good, very beautiful description of what the ascension process is, going from a solid directly to a gas or less dense version without the liquefaction, which would be decomposition. You turn into a liquid, you turn into a goo. That is what decomposition is. So remember, remind me, everyone, I'm going to talk about overlapping time fields in level 2, and also overlapping time fields and also states of matter. Overlapping time fields and states of matter. Because I have so many things in my brain, let me write it down. Hold on a second, guys. Hold on. Oh, here's my thing. Thank you. Next question. Let me move on to level 2. Dominic says, so crystal has a capacity for consciousness, but has it got an individual awareness? Yes, it has an individual awareness, and it's also connected to the rest of the band. So let's say you have one amethyst that says, my name is Mr. Purple. I'm the amethyst crystal sitting right here. It is like saying, I'm the drummer, I'm the bass player. And that amethyst crystal is also connected to all of the other amethyst band members, and they're all playing their songs together. Patricia is making a reference to Futurama, but I'm not sure if I remember what I was saying when she said that. But I do know that show, and it's a very it's an intelligent show. It has some good stuff in there. So let me move on to level 2. Sorry, I'm drinking so much. Or a better way of saying thank you for understanding that I need to drink so much while I'm talking so much. I'm going to move on to level 2, and thank you to everyone who's been on board. And re-encouragement, if you feel called to this material and would like to delve deeper, please do enroll. I always include the enrollment links. The enrollment links are not just about sales, because I'm really not a salesperson here. However, I do love it when people pay tuition and enroll and are committed to learning new things. Scroll down at those enrollment links. Some of the most important lessons are enabled for free preview, so that way you can check things out even if you're not enrolled. Please do enroll. You can do tuition through Patreon. You can do tuition through a scholarship if you don't have any money. Like, participate, do it. Oh, Patricia was saying cryogenics freezing the head. The head museum, exactly. So yeah, that's a funny show, and I like it a lot. And it's got this part where it's famous people, you don't die, they just chop off your head, they put a special collar on it, you get frozen, you're in the head museum. So they got George Washington, they got all these different people there. But yes, no, that is a horrible, horrible way of extending your lifespan and extending your suffering without actually going in the direction that you need to go. So this is not about just life extension at any cost, which is literally what a lot of dark magicians do. This is about going in the right direction. So you could ascend at age 35, chronologically. You could also ascend at age 89. It's not about how much time it takes for your experience. It is about becoming the truest version of yourself. Let me end level 1. Thank you very much, everyone. You're wonderful. Thank you for your good comments and questions. And let me move on to level 2.